July 10th, letter to Hansadutta from Tamal Krishna. Also on July 10th, at the request of Srila Prabhupada, Tamal Krishna sent a letter to Hansadutta Prabhu. Even though His Divine Grace made the effort to sign the July 9th letter, presumably on the morning of the 10th, Srila Prabhupada was too weak to read and sign most other letters after this date. Now that Srila Prabhupada was so ill and weak, the process became that Tamal Krishna, acting as Srila Prabhupada's secretary, would read the letters that were sent from various devotees, read them to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada would verbally give a response. But unlike the July 9th letter, where he took time, days and days and meetings and made the effort to carefully word it and craft the document, so that but for the other letters, Prabhupada would just simply give a verbal comment, and then it was up to Tamal Krishna to actually write the actual letter and send it. So that became the way the other letters were sent after this, most other letters. The following is only an excerpt from the letter that Tamal wrote and sent to Hansadutta. I'll just read it. His Divine Grace said, quote, "You are a suitable person and you can give initiation to those who are ready for it. I have selected you among 11 men as Ritvik, or representative of the Acharya, to give initiations, both first and second initiation, on my behalf." And then in parentheses, is the end of the quote from Prabhupada, and then in parentheses it says, "A newsletter is being sent to all the temple presidents and GBC in this regard, listing the 11 representatives selected by His Divine Grace. Those who are initiated are the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, and anyone who you deem fit and initiate in this way, you should send their names to be included in Srila Prabhupada's Initiated Disciples book. In this way, the temple presidents will send their recommendations for initiation directly to the nearest representative, who will give spiritual name or chant on the Gayatri thread, just as Srila Prabhupada had been doing." While Srila Prabhupada mentions, that was the end of the quote from the letter, while Srila Prabhupada mentions that Hansadutta had been selected as one of the 11 Ritvik representatives who will initiate on His Divine Grace's behalf, there is no mention at all of his ever becoming an actual guru in the future. Note that the original letter, which is longer and discusses other topics, this text, and only this text, is underlined in the original letter itself. The first sentence is actually quoted as Srila Prabhupada's, a quote from Srila Prabhupada, and the rest may be underlined to denote this topic to be of greater importance. Also, it is of interest that the fact that the word Ritvik is again misspelled, the same here as it was in the July 9th letter, dated just a day earlier, where it is spelled R-I-T-T-I-K. And it's spelled that way again in this letter to Hansadutta, and again on the 31st of July in another letter. Since all three letters were written by Tamal Krishna, obviously at the time he didn't know the correct spelling of that word. Note that these letters constitute Srila Prabhupada's last and final letters to these GBC men, and most specifically to the men he had named to become his Ritvik representatives on the topic of initiation before he departs. These are the only letters written on this topic after May 28th meeting. And all that Srila Prabhupada mentions in regards to future initiations regarding Hansadutta is that Hansadutta will act as Srila Prabhupada's Ritvik representative and perform the initiations on Srila Prabhupada's behalf, where those who are initiated via that process will be the direct disciples of His Divine Grace. There is absolutely no mention of these men ever becoming actual gurus. If Srila Prabhupada had at all wanted that these men would become actual gurus after he departs, then most definitely Srila Prabhupada would have mentioned that more important point. Obviously, Srila Prabhupada would know if that, as anyone else would know, that if that were the case, then the Ritvik rule would have been only temporary, just for a short period. maybe one or two initiations, but afterwards, after Srila Prabhupada had left this world, if that's what he wanted them to become gurus and they became actual gurus, then that would be far more important role for these men to perform. And yet, and definitely Srila Prabhupada would have emphasized that many more times in his letter to them. Obviously, Srila Prabhupada never wanted that those who were named as Ritviks would become actual gurus. That is a total misunderstanding by the GBC. If the GBC can't come to terms to accept this, then those who are really sincere in accepting Srila Prabhupada and accepting his shelter and following his teachings, they must demand a new GBC or start the real ISKCON all over again.